don't know about you guys, but so far I've been extremely happy with all the talks that we've seen over the past couple of days. They've been amazing. Lots of crazy technologies, like reinforcing the things that we love about Remix and just hammering home exactly why we're here. And I get the opportunity of following these up and really tying them all together for you. So my name is Brian Lee. I'm the VP of Engineering at Nellis Auction. And today we're going to talk about reaching new heights with Remix, Prisma, and Google Cloud Run. This is my team's recollection of taking Remix to production. So we're going to start out with a brief history. Nobody knows who Nellis is, right? So we're going to go into what Nellis is and a little bit of history of our technology. Then we'll talk about why did we see the need for this change. We'll go a little bit into why or how we actually did this change. We've went through so much of it here today. We know why we like Remix. We know some of the patterns we need to do. So I'm going to skip over some of the stuff that everyone knows already. And I'm going to really try to focus in on specific patterns that my team use to make the transition into the next framework faster and just more reliable all the way through. And lastly, I'm really excited to be able to show you guys exactly what happened, real measurements of our application after we've actually made this transition, and show you some evidence that backs up everything you've been hearing here. So, introducing Nellis. We are a reverse logistics and auction company based out of Las Vegas. We started as in-person auctions in Las Vegas, and today we're doing business in 3 states, and we're just continuing to grow. We focus on taking items that go from the customer back to the retail chain. So we get those items off many, many trucks, and we have to inventory them and get them back out onto an e-commerce platform where people bid for the, we hand it off to the person with the highest price. And everything is done locally in the vicinity. We don't do any shipping or anything like that. Okay, so let's get into the evolution of Nellis Auction and talk about our technology. In the early days, it was just Spencer, our CEO, and all of his spreadsheets. I mean, he would sit me down and actually show me what he had going on. These things were crazy. And all of the software that actually ran the business was externally built. No in-house developers, no anything like that. But these processes that were created helped build the backbone, which would soon become all of the software that was to follow. So in 2021, I joined the site. It's also the same time that we launched the very first customer presence. So Nellis is actually running the software that reaches the customer. And this was, you know what it is. It's a React to single page app. We're all here talking about the transition from a single page app to a Remix. So in 2022, we started getting a lot more control over our application. We had control over the infrastructure. We had integration between our employee tools and the way it reaches our customer, but we didn't have that tight integration of our customer front end yet. We got a lot of benefit out of this, but we're sticklers. We're still not really happy. So, again, let's not go into this one. You guys know, we're here at RemixConf, and at this point in our phase, we're looking to go SSR. And there's a new one that's getting a lot of buzz around this time. So we're hearing talks of Remix. RemixConf 22 was actually recently announced while we were going through this decision-making time, and we attended. And there's one talk that stood out to me, and it's one reason why I'm here telling you about this today. And it was a talk done by Dennis about SEO. It was with neighbors. This was something that this was a business driver for us, and we were looking for a way to fulfill this need. And we came to the conference, and we got to de-risk it right in front of it. We got to sit there where you are and see someone who did it. And we can go back and with confidence, we can say, hey, we can do that too. So at this time, the Remix framework was relatively young, probably the shakiest characteristic of the framework. But commitment to web fundamentals and leveraging of the platform was huge. And we really wanted to deliver a better experience to our users. In fact, we want to deliver the best. We're going to go all in. And coming out to the conference really allowed us to feel the sense of community. We got the feeling that this thing is going to grow. So it was settled. went back to Vegas and we got to deliver Spencer his favorite news ever. You know that customer site we just launched? We're going to redo it. So let's hop right into that migration. So step one, this has already been covered in the conference, and there's actually a talk from last year by John Jensen at Remix 22, and it's been mentioned already, Incremental Remix. If you're interested in getting to know how to put these two applications together and share routing and things like that, go over there and take a look at that app. But pretty much, we drop our entire SPA into the routes, and it handles all of the routing just like it did before. Easy transition, nothing's broken, exactly what we want, progressive adoption. It's also been talked about before, this client-only little component that sits over the top just disables all server-side rendering, because we're just not ready for that yet. Again, lots of resources on exposing your server-side variables to the client side. The only thing I want to call out here, which is important and reoccurring in Remix, they don't impose restrictions on you. There's no said convention, this is how you do it. In our case, we're migrating, and CRA uses this React app underscore. Guess what? We can just keep doing the same thing. We can take our environment variables, we can extract the ones that our applications already depend on, and push them down into the client. And then you got to do a little search and replace, Next thing you're gonna have issues with, and this is varying, it depends on what libraries you use. Some are just gonna explode. You can't use this on a server environment. Sometimes they'll blow up in section A, right at the import phase. Usually you can just upgrade the package and it works, because if it's well maintained, they've probably gotten rid of this issue. A lot of times it happens on section B when you actually instantiate the response or this object. Maybe it's a WYSIWYG engine, something like that. That means you can hop down to section C, and you can just make a getter so that you can retrieve this instance when you need it. Or maybe you only need one instance alive at one time, or it's expensive. You can create that lazy instantiation on the next block. And in the worst case, if you really just can't figure out what's going on, and it's just blowing up when you import it, you always have that dynamic import at the bottom that you can lean on to try to make sure your app can actually get off the ground. Checkpoint 1, wannabe phase complete. So we're not really taking advantage of Remix's features here. Honestly, it's actually kind of less efficient than what we had before. Before we were deploying our static app on a CDN, and we didn't have to worry about all this stuff. And now we're running our own app server and serving our own static files. It's not really ideal, but we just built that foundation. We're ready to build right on top of it and really get to where we get the benefits. So preparing for the actions and loaders. My team at this point kind of disperses. We can start working on different pieces of our transition separately. We've got some people taking our CSS and JS solution and creating the providers. We got some people creating the database connectivity. We're using Prisma. We're going to continue to use our API clients because a lot of our data is retrieved and mutated from those API endpoints. So we're going to create API clients in our code base that are ready to handle that. You might have this provider tree at the top of your single page app. You probably need to keep that, not unless you want it to be broken. So you're going to grab all that stuff and pull it up into that root level component. For now, you don't want it there. It's likely the case after you continue your transition. You'll just start deleting them, and it's magical. And obviously, one big transition here, we're changing to cookies. So we have to start working on that cookie transition. Pro tip here, don't ditch your JWT. If you're doing a migration like we are, our API is going to continue to live on, and we're going to use it as a provider of our data. And if we don't have that JWT, we can't talk to it. So we're going to take that JWT, and we'll drop it right inside the cookie we're already going to assign. And this is important for traceability. When you go to make a response to your API, you could do it as a service account, but then you don't know which user is doing it. So you got to add some extra stuff to it. Keeping this here just makes everything go smoother. All right, we've got our fundamental components set up. Now it's time to begin the real transition. This is the real work of the project. We're going to build out our actions and loaders. These are going to somewhat repetitively pull data from your database and feed it down into your views and take form data and apply it to your database. But you already know that. So one thing I do want to touch on here is when we got productive, because in the beginning we were not. We were quite slow at making these actions and loaders and finding that rhythm. The rhythm is huge. So the biggest component to this is finding those things that you do over and over again and making them easier to do. The actions and loaders development is like the majority of this transition, so I'm going to take a little bit of time going through how we dealt with it. Remix itself doesn't impose patterns. These actions and functions are just functions. So you need to think about how you want your action loaders to look so they're consistent and less cognitive overhead for the developer as they're going through this process. So make code-based design decisions early. You're going to have a ton of models coming out of the database, models coming out of the API. Different models going to go down to the front end, and there's this transition phase in the middle where like everyone's going to get tripped up. Figure this out. Decide I'm going to have models for my views, models for my database, models for my API, and I'm going to put them in these places, and everybody knows where they go, and it really, really speeds things up. Server and client code will now be intermingled, and we're not used to this yet. Be aware of those server.ts files. Not beware, but be aware, because you'll need to use them. You might have server-only code, and make sure you're being cognizant of that you're naming it correctly so it can't be pulled into your client. So let's get into the little tips and tricks I have here. I should note here that this is my team's experience. We did this. We used these patterns. They're not for everybody. Take them, blend them with all the wealth of knowledge we've gotten here at RemixConf, and make your own solutions. But with these patterns that we used, we got great benefits out of it. So error handling. I mean, look, I just followed up that, the talk by Glenn where he talked about error handling, so it's perfect timing. Super important. We use TypeScript for us. We use TypeScript to force our error handling and make sure it works well. So we don't really like the try-catch scenario. We use like a Rust-style result object where the library is actually called true myth. We return a result object from things that can fail. And when they do, TypeScript actually forces you to check to see if the result is okay. If you don't, it doesn't let you access the value. So this means that as we're writing actions and loaders, series of things that can fail, we know at every single stage the developer has done their due diligence to make sure that if a failure occurred, we're doing something with it. Next is our database queries. Again, doesn't really matter how you do it. I highly suggest whatever error handling mechanism you're utilizing, you blend it right in. And one thing that did help us is segregating an area of our app where all of these DAO layers, this whole DAO layer goes. Again, lower cognitive overhead. You know where they go, you know how they look. Very direct as well, makes them easier to test. Okay, let's keep extending that TypeScript. Let's make it work for us. So we're going to create API clients for our own API. I didn't really go into depth here, but the point of it is that we are going to automatically inject that auth token, that thing we're always going to need. We're going to make sure that the thing it takes as input is typed, and the thing that comes out of it is typed. These are going across the network. There are no types going across the network. Maybe if you're using something like TRPC, you have something. But here, we're going to impose it ourselves, and you might want to add some validation here and there if you're unsure what's going to happen. Or just extra security, I guess. All right, this is the last one I'm going to cover today. It's that little meaty section I talked about when you're getting data from your database and you're pushing it down into your views, the transformation phase. Internally, we call it the gauntlet, but basically, we're going to talk about the process of taking object of type A and turning it into an object of type B. If you're ever there just yelling at TypeScript because it just won't let you pass some type into your function or your loader that you want to be passing, you might be missing a phase like this. And Zod has like transform built into it, so that might be a suitable use case for you. In our case, we might have an object that has optional types or types we really must have in them, and we don't want to push that logic down to our view anymore. We're moving everything up to the server, so we want to make sure that the view gets what it wants right out of the loader, and maybe utilize catch boundaries when we need to. So here we're going to do things like, in this example, the name is optional. It's allowed to be a pet. If it doesn't have a name, I just name it Fluffy. All right, we have our building blocks. Now we can begin carving out our routes. Data now travels from the top down. We're constantly moving network calls up to the top, hoisting them up, building out our models in the loaders, and pushing them down in a way that they're already ready to go, and code just disappears. The view just, it starts to disintegrate. You don't need all of these components thin out to the point where you just get rid of them. I would caution being overly dry when you're building out your routes. Sometimes if you build composition patterns, maybe ones that you're used to before, they hide this benefit. They contain code that really, if you just flatten them out and open them up, you realize, I don't need any of this. And things just start to shrink. Less code's better code. We did it. We have a full remix app. Now, let's be honest, the action loader phase takes a little while. But we're here, and one thing you can do to make that phase easier, again, referring back to that talk, segregate your routes. Maybe you have a whole dashboard that's its own like little space. Maybe just keep the SPA up there and work on the ones outside of it. You can find ways to make this incremental and make it less painful. All right, let's deploy it. So we use Cloud Run. This is very similar to Fly.io, and I really enjoy that product. I use it for side projects. At work, we're a Google shop. A lot of our services are Google. It makes sense for us. It's really easy. It deploys nearly the same way. You just need a Docker image, and I would actually recommend using Fly's. It's excellent. It's got multi-stage builds. It pulls like developed dependencies out of the final image. It's got everything you want out of a Docker image. So we take our Docker image, we just put it into Cloud Run, create a new service, click deploy, and it's up. We actually use Cloud SQL, so that allows us to mount the database directly into the container without worrying about access. We can use Google Manager's Secret Manager to mount all of our environment variables directly in, and it comes load balanced and auto-scaled right out of the box. And I don't know what your favorite logging solution is, but Google's pretty good at like searching text. So if you use their Google Cloud logging library, that thing's awesome. We had a problem. Our app was really slow. Don't worry, Spencer. We have totally planned for this. This was totally expected. But how could this be? We spent all this time on this. We can't have people loading our app and just lackluster performance here. We actually talked about this today, and I was glad to hear about it. Igor Nevi from Cloudflare talked about the problems with physical distance. It's really important. And now, you're moving back into the server realm. You have to think about the way your data travels differently than you did before. The distance between your server and your database is super important, and this is the use case for it that you heard earlier. We had our servers in Los Angeles, because that's where we created the Cloud Run service, not really thinking about it. We had our database in Las Vegas. That was enough. It seems close. It was enough to cause like a dramatic impact on the performance of our application. So we had to make sure to bring those two things closer. And if this is a restriction for you, beware. So it's something you should think about before you make this transition, and everything will just go better. Okay, we did it. It's super blazing fast now. We have an amazing experience. It's returned. Everything we saw locally is alive in our cloud environment. The 6 months have just culminated to this big event, like we're getting ready to deploy and everything's just working awesome. I don't have a but here. This is the good part. We did it. See, Spencer told you. Okay, we're all engineers. We know, we're never done. But there's some things that we definitely touched on afterwards. We got rid of the styling on the front end. We go for statically built. Insert tailwind fight here. Happened in our office. So also profile your stuff, look for over-rendering. We use location a lot. We did have a problem with that. Make sure that you're using providers in context today. And what we did is we started getting rid of everything, just tear it all out, all the client stuff. Turns out some of those were useful. We used some of those and we actually got some of our performance back. So just be careful of over-rendering. You still might need to get into it. And optimize for SEO and message previews. This is a big win for us as a business. We got our sitemaps generated all within the same code base, and we put the right meta tags in our app so that when you send a text message, you get the product image right there. Lots of fun stuff you can do. And we made it. It didn't, thank you. And we didn't really take 19 minutes to do it. And, it took like way longer, but we won't really get into that. So let's see how it actually measures up. Incredible results. And a call out here for Eric and Henry talking about this earlier, telling you how much this matters. It does. So we use web page test, and let's be honest, our team last week was like all over web page test, making sure this thing's awesome, because we knew Henry's gonna be pulling it up. He's like already pulling up stuff on the QR codes. So you can see across the board, I mean, it's huge. I did a little average, and 75% increase across the board. On these statistics I'm showing here, these aren't all of them, but I'm not hiding anything. The closest one was cumulative layout shift, and it was like a tiny difference. It still came out on top in this version. All right, but you said it affected users, right? What's the business value? Let's see. This is real. This is, as of our deployment, we have 175% signups since before January 12th, which is our deployment day. User sessions up 65%. And a big one, a new presence. We get 25% more traffic from organic search results. We're not even doing this. They're just showing up at our site more often. So, to touch on Andre's point from earlier, if a business motivation is necessary, I think you might be looking at it. And that's the story of Nellis Auction. Big shout out to my team. They're all here. Spencer even came out for my talk. So if anything we've done sounds interesting to you, then please come find us, talk to us about it. Maybe you're having similar issues. And we have lots of changes coming along in the future. So who knows? I mean, maybe if you are interested in joining a new team, maybe Nellis Auction could be your place. Thanks, everybody.